Welcome, people. We're going to start the meeting because we have a bunch of, we have several guests here, and we should get started. We're really glad that you're here, and we'd like to hear from you. So go ahead and do you guys want to introduce yourselves? We have
I'm Paul Fassler from Burlington.
Melody.
Carol Irons from Albany.
Eugene Rick from Swan.
Carolyn Greenham from Orange.
Jess Robinson, I'm the administrative helper here on the commission. I'm the state archaeologist with Division for Historic Preservation.
Henry Brett, Burlington, Union County. Welcome.
Fred Wiseman, Swanton.
Philip Pratt, also from Burlington.
John Moody from Sharon.
Well, thank you so much for having us. My name is Monica Hutt, and I'm actually the Commissioner of the Department of Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living. And did you want to introduce yourself?
Angela Smith-Jang, and I work in the Department of Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living. I oversee our State Unit on Aging, our Older Americans Act work.
So we're here actually today because one of the jobs of the department, and the acronym for the department is DALE, just so I don't have to keep saying it all the way out loud, but one of DALE's roles is to support the programs around aging in the state of Vermont. So we have programs that support kind of really high-end needs. It's a program called Choices for Care, but more relevant to this conversation, we are the administrators for the Older Americans Act, which is a federal act in national. Obviously, Vermont has its portion of the Older Americans Act, and that requires us to support individuals, and I didn't make the age range, so don't kill the messenger, 60 and older fall under the Older Americans Act. And there's a range of programs and supports and services that we're responsible to provide. And one of the things that we realized as we were putting together the next state plan on aging, which is due in 2019, was that we've never really had a conversation with this commission and with the tribes here in Vermont, just to talk about the issues around aging, and if there is anything distinct and different that we should be paying attention to that we just haven't really even thought about up till now. So we wanted to just come and open up the conversation, make sure that you knew who we were, talk to you a little bit, and Angela can do it about the State Unit on Aging and the state plan, and then really just hear from you. You know, are there things that we haven't thought about when we think about aging and staying healthy and staying in your own home and accessing the supports that you need to maintain kind of health and well-being long into your adulthood and beyond? Is there anything specific culturally to Abenaki and to there's more than one tribe in Vermont, right? I always want to make sure that I'm careful about that. To the tribes here in Vermont that we just haven't thought about, that we should be paying attention to in a different way. So we just wanted to kind of open it up and just see what we've been missing, because I suspect a little bit, if not a lot.
Well, I used to work for the Agency on Aging in the Northeast Kingdom.
Oh, okay.
And then I also worked with a mental health clinic as an elder care clinician. I know that they long ago, when Marie Barton was there, she had wanted to do a project with Native elders, but my experience, and I'm a Native elder myself, my experience was that they did not so identify anytime anyone from an agency or state came. There's a long shadow from eugenics, and that was still operative.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's as dynamic now, because it's just about really another generation of elders now. But that was a strong factor, and I know that because I declined to help with any special project in the Northeast Kingdom because of that, from my own casework population and knowledge of the culture, they did try a project out of the Swanton, St. Albans area.
Do you remember how long ago, Carol, do you think? Roughly?
Around 2000, give or take a year or two either way, but
Yeah.
it was somewhere around there, I think. So whether the St. Albans office has any record of whether they actually got something off the ground and did it or not, I really don't know. Because I then was shifting the job to the mental health clinic. But I'm in that population now, and I don't find people as reluctant to self-identify. But they certainly were then. So that would be the biggest hang-up, is not identifying that ethnic identity.
Yeah.
If they're going to go to those offices and seek any of the programs, which a lot of them do,
Yeah.
they just give their identity as white.
Yeah, and I don't even know that we necessarily, I don't mean to just jump right in, but I don't know that we necessarily need people to self-identify. I think it's more we need to build the cultural competence so that we are just offering things and people take advantage of it as they so wish, not necessarily targeting. We could do that if you thought that made sense.
I think the problem was in terms of some funding streams. If they were serving a higher population of culturally identified people, they could get some extra funding. But that requires identification.
Interesting. I mean, because Vermont, because we don't have federally recognized tribes, there's already a little bit of a
Ringer.
kind of. We just don't get, we don't get resources in that stream. You're right.
Okay.
But I'm Angela saying that maybe through the minority stream. But again, I think we can get there, but I think we have to build, if we need to, if we want to, I think we have to build, again, just that kind of cultural competence to start with and see what we might be missing and what we can offer just more universally, not necessarily worry about the
Right,
identification.
but what I found was people, elders with some serious health complications, were very resistant to going to clinics because they were afraid to be identified. I like I said, I'm not sure that's operative now, but it certainly was 10, 12, 15 years ago.
I think that you're still going to find that that is the case with many people. Like even visiting the Burlington Health and Rehab, there was a few of our elders who were there that it was the first time in their life who they'd come out and just said, I'm an Abenaki person. And I very distinctly remember the woman sitting next to him saying, shouldn't say that out loud. It's pretty dangerous to say that. And I was like, interesting. The first time you say it and someone immediately tells you not to. And that was like 2 years ago. So I think you're still going to find that is the case with the older generation. But people are changing a little bit because we are all changing. So there are 4 state-recognized bands, but there aren't just 4 bands. So there are some unrecognized bands as well. And I know Missisquoi has this really great model.
It's going on today, actually. Voices Against Violence is attending a cultural competency 2-day training at our office. Part of what they asked for, and this was a good fit for, was what is it that is specific to your members, or you have to remember Swanton Village and Swanton Town make up approximately 6,000 people, plus or minus. And on our tribal rolls, the ones we know of that have actually come forward and said, hey, I'm a member of the Missisquoi Abenaki, is nearly at 3,000. I would estimate there's probably another 20-25% that aren't even on our tribal rolls. So one of the things I think that would be safe to offer to your agency is this 2-day training where, if nothing, I mean, at the most, what you would have to lose is, 2 days of listening to us drone on about what it is like to be, a member of the tribe and or a person of that culture in this population. So, I mean, if at any time you want to explore that further, just reach out to me and I'm sure I can at least point you towards the folks that would be able to take care of that for you.
Eugene is the chief of Missisquoi. Okay. And one of the things that they're doing there is the cultural center is in the basement with the elderly home there. So
In Swanton.
In Swanton. And so I know that Brenda was very active in trying to make sure that that model was still used, because they do like elder dinners and they have the kids go up And in terms of culturally speaking, that's what we should be doing, and it would be the older folks who are taking care of them, and also who's passing on culture, who has all of the information. So our elders are absolutely essential to us. And so they have a model there for that reason. So Brenda Gagne, who does the Abenaki outreach program through Title VII Indian Education, is it Title VII? Yeah. So they have that model for a reason, and she can probably talk more about it, but she's a really good resource.
So Melody, is it the cultural center is in the basement of the senior center in Swanton?
It's at the old school. What is it?
It's an old high school. It's been turned into a senior housing center.
Senior center housing.
Yeah, it's a really great place. And in terms of one of the things we haven't talked about is disabilities. I think you'll find, so Indigenous people have like the highest rate per capita of signing up for the armed forces. And so our warriors are very important, and I think you'll find that in terms of disabilities and there's a connection there. There's some intersectionalities that should be looked at. And then also in terms of disabilities, if you look at who we typically see as our medicine people, or people who are really integral, that have been touched in a different way by the Creator. And so where one culture might see a disability, we don't. And they are essential to our community. And so when you look at, like, I know when I was growing up at Missisquoi, the medicine person there probably is considered on state assistance. Is that right, Fred?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Burton.
Yeah.
But for us, he's an essential member of our community, and he wouldn't be ever considered as having a disability for us. So we do look at it in a very different way. Does anybody else have anything else to add?
You touched on it a little bit with that community and somehow building, if there's a, I don't know, for your programming with a one-on-one trusting, some way of building trusting relationships, having the basis of the service people that are engaging with the population be Native peoples, so that there can be a level of trust, so that, and it's definitely more of that community, offering alternative programming if there are substance abuse, mental health issues, like Melody was saying, it's not necessarily viewed the same way, so that there's a different way of looking at those supports. I'm not saying it well. You said it very well for the thoughts in my head versus, yeah.
Oh, and Lucy Cannondale, she's the former chair here, and she is a citizen of the Nulhegan Band, and she works with the veterans. She at the hospital.
VA?
She works at the VA, and she helps people cross that are Indigenous, and she does ceremonies for them. And so she's a good contact, and she is also a nurse and an all-around awesome person. So she's a good contact for that. And I'm trying to think of
I was also thinking of if there are definite places where there's more concentration of Native elders, that would be helpful for us to know too, because we can work with our network partners like the Agencies on Aging and others to try to do some of that work around having the right kind of training and the building of relationships, and having Native elders perhaps be part of that work. If the communities are concentrated in any way, or is it really spread out? Like, those are questions I just have to better understand how we can be supportive. The State Unit on Aging overseeing the Older Americans Act, it has a really broad kind of...
Sorry, can you get what he wants to say so that you can say it once they're done?
A really broad...
Well, you should mention your work, the Red Road and some other stuff that you've done. Well, but it still is a Native American way.
I I have been trained in the Red Road for Recovery model for substance abuse and I have used it with Native American elders here in Chittenden County.
Nice. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's great. So our work is really broad in that we're looking at the whole population and trying to ensure that we can support older Vermonters to age well and prevent a lot of need for higher levels of care. And so the Older Americans Act programs are really trying to help people age in place, age at home, be as independent as long as possible. So it includes services like nutrition supports, home delivered meals or congregate meals, transportation support, a lot of in-home supports like case management, personal care, adult day, those kinds of things. And then health promotion, disease prevention is another part of it. So helping people stay active through evidence-based programming to prevent falls, to manage chronic disease, those kinds of things, as well as family caregiver support. As we see our population aging, we're also seeing a growing number of Vermonters who are family caregivers. And so it's support with respite, education, training, peer support, that kind of thing for family caregivers as well. And so our primary partners in community in the work of the Older Americans Act are our 5 area agencies on aging that cover the state. And their role is to kind of act as that regional planner for their multiple county area in providing the services on the ground. So we're kind of coordinating at the state level, and they are really supposed to have their eyes and ears in the various communities and coordinating out those supports and services, working with the network of providers. So it's a big body of work, and it all kind of culminates in a state plan on aging, as Monica mentioned. So we're working on developing our next 4-year state plan on aging, which, we look at data, we look at trends, we look at where, the key areas where we really need to see some improvement. So for example, we have a goal around falls prevention because Vermont has a really high rate of falls and injuries and deaths due to falls across the older population. So really looking at ways we can expand programming and options and awareness around that. That's just one example of the goals within the state plan. What else should I say?
I mean, I think that one of the things that is different for us right now, and that Angela and I have really tried to take on, is that when people think about aging, certainly in the state of Vermont and probably nationally as well, there's this sort of fearful, anxiety-ridden approach to it versus people sort of understanding it as part of this very natural life cycle and how amazing it is to get older and to know what you know and to have all that experience to share back and trying to change a little bit of the frame, because people tend to approach it as this time when people are needy and bedridden and weaker or less able, less contributory. And there couldn't be anything further from the truth, especially in the state of Vermont. We have one of the highest volunteer rates in the country, and most of those volunteers are older Vermonters. When you think about civic engagement, community engagement, it's mostly our older Vermonters that are doing that work. And so really trying to change the dynamic and the conversation. So yes, there in any population, at any age, there are going to be kind of high-end needs. And as a society, we need to take care of those needs. And there is all of this richness that older Vermonters bring to the table, and we don't want communities to sort of forget that and to pigeonhole the conversation into what their needs are. It's really more, what do they bring back to the community? And so trying to kind of flip that thinking a little bit is a huge part of the work that we're doing now, at the same time that we have to maintain all those services and support. So yeah, those exist, and there's this whole conversation. And so trying to get the governor really on board with thinking about older Vermonters, as he talks about the workforce issues. We say, you've got this whole group of older Vermonters who who either don't want to be done working or can't yet be done working, I mean, let's be honest. And that's a whole workforce that we need to pay attention to. So having him really get behind this award that we created that really honors businesses that have policies that support older workers, more flexible policies, better retirement programs, the ability to telecommute, all the kinds of things that make it easier to work and allow individuals to keep contributing back. So trying to kind of flip the conversation a little bit is a big part, is actually the biggest part of what we're trying to do, in addition to, I think, everything else, and framing everything like that versus everybody talking about getting older like it's this terrible thing, because, the news flash is that as soon as you're born, that starts. So if you're going to pretend that that's not happening, you simply kind of put blinders on and aren't paying attention to your own body and to what's happening. So I think trying to make that change has been big for us.
That corresponds
Right.
well with our culture, though.
Exactly.
Right.
Because the elders
Right.
are honored and
Right. And we've, I think that, so my family are immigrants, and so we have a really different approach to that in my own family. And so kind of bumping up against what's a little bit more typical is interesting. It just sort of changes the dynamic altogether. And I think that culturally we are so fearful of this that we aren't really approaching it with the kind of joy and opportunities that really should be a part of it. And I think that then we create these really elaborate structures to take care of people that separates from community. And so trying to really imagine communities that are inclusive. And that works as well for the disability work that we do in the department. How do you get people to really understand how much richer an experience is when it is inclusive of everybody? So I think it does really correspond well to more Native values and culture typically.
And I think you'll find, so there's a bunch of programs, like the Mohegans have fuel assistance, and they'll actually go to different elders' homes and they'll bring firewood and they'll stack it, or they'll help them do whatever.
Right.
So there's a whole bunch of things that are happening that we're already doing, but doing for our own folks. And so
Yeah.
one of the other things that you could look at is for us, making sure that our elders that can't make it to ceremonies can get to ceremonies. So if there is a program where they can be transported, I know my grandmother, there was an Abenaki gentleman who used to come and pick them up, and they would bring them to like Doris Winkler's house, and they would do ceremony there, and it was kind of cool. But it was actually bringing them to making sure that they could do sweat lodges, or they could do whatever they wanted to do to take part in the community. I think that would be kind of a cool cultural piece, is that making sure it's like going to church.
Yeah.
Well, it is going to church. It's our church, but there you go. So, okay, so you have 45 minutes. If we take the last 5 minutes there for public.
Well, I was just going to add something to this conversation.
Yeah.
So there's a woman named Margaret Higgins who works for the state. She's an evaluator. She's down at Central Vermont Hospital right now. They're doing their annual survey of the Woodbridge Center rehab and nursing home. And I was just visiting an Abenaki elder who just fell 3 days ago, broke her hip, on. So it was interesting talking with Margaret, because they're evaluating this facility. Everybody was incredible. It's great. But I think you'll find that Margaret, who's Abenaki, and there are hundreds of Abenaki people we know of who are in the professional services taking care of people. And much like the veteran analogy, that there are more veterans per capita in Vermont who are Abenaki or Native, that's also true in the healthcare world. That at least down where we are in White River Junction, DHMC, a quarter of the people who work there are Indians. Now they might be, in the working staff cooking the food. They might be nurses. They might be doctors. I mean, they come and all of that is a vital part of how things get done in Vermont. But it is extraordinarily understated. Calvin Coolidge, whose room we're in, his grandmother was Abenaki and Mohican. Nobody knew about it until after he got done, because you couldn't be Indian and be president of the United States back in those days. But there's a tremendous amount of potential. And if you're in touch with Margaret, I'm sure you'll be able to find her. She should be able to really guide you through the state system and what's going on for Native people, because she's been doing it for 40 years, much like you.
And there's a lot of these facilities, like if you go to Dartmouth, they have opportunities, say you're going in for surgery or something, where they'll have smudge rooms, so make sure that they can take part in the ceremony before they go in, which is normally not allowed.
Smudge anywhere as long as you do it without setting off the alarms.
Yes. Yes.
Even in the morgue.
So,
Does UVM MC have
Yes,
anything like that?
UVM, you can do it. It's case by case, but we've done it many times. In fact, curbs all of the hospital, every hospital in the state of Vermont have participated in those kinds of gatherings. And so,
So I'm just going to leave you all with this. You know, it also has, so it just has the basic overview of the OAA work that we do, and it has my contact information on it. So if I can't find these people, I need to come back.
if you want the contact, so one of the things you could do is you could, I don't know if you have lists or anything that you maintain or newsletters or whatever. Each of the 4 chiefs, it would be good to keep them on your lists, because then if you want to reach out, like Don Stevens is probably our most like active chief that goes out and does a lot of just about everything. But all of the chiefs, if they can be included, they can get any information you want out, or they can set up like a focus group or something that whatever you need, then I would say reach out to the 4 chiefs. And so they're, in terms of being spread out, because that's one of the questions you had. Missisquoi is super concentrated up in the northwest corner around Franklin County. And then Nulhegan is pretty concentrated around the Northeast Kingdom, but they still have members all over, just like all of us do. Elnu is based in Jamaica, Vermont, and everybody is all over the place, and there's only about 100 people in it. So, yeah. And then the COAS, they're based in around Pike, New Hampshire, Woodsville, New Hampshire, somewhere there. And the Orange County area is part of their area, maybe. I don't know. Somewhere in there, middle Vermont.
Around where Blue Mountain School is.
That. Yes. So, and if you need to, if you want any of their contacts, I can get them to you.
Okay, great.
Which may no longer be in existence after this year.
Yep. So, any last questions? Any updates on the Abenaki Cultural Regeneration Project?
Just a little bit. We're tentatively planning the last weekend of August for a 2-day or day and a half, because then people will have to hit the road. But we're going to try to, it's not real firm yet, but we're trying to get a hold of an herbalist who will we'll use the kitchen there and just teach people how to make tinctures, oils, and salves. You know, use the herbs or preserve them, so that as you're gathering, you can go on with that.
Is this for the people that had already taken part in the...
Primarily, at least, yeah. But if someone else is interested, up to a point, I think we could accommodate, because it isn't requiring the previous involvement.
How do you want to get that out, the word, if you're...
Well, I want to line up the teachers first, and then maybe Carol can send it out email to you guys.
Okay.
To all of you, if that would work, and then you can spread it. We would send the info to the tribal chiefs.
Okay.
What's the limit on participants? What's the limit on participants?
Because we'd be staying overnight, we can have up to 16, so we're going to have a couple of teachers. I imagine we could take 12 to 15.
Cool. Let's talk about the Swanton Monument Road right now.
Okay.
I just thought we should wait.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So we got a call from the Robertsons and Sue. We actually got a call from
Highgate Town Office, who had been alerted by Mr. Robertson and Mrs. Coda at the end of Monument Road, near the monument, that something was going on with the land there. They saw a bunch of rises. We subsequently went up and on the portion of the land just down the road back towards Highgate, away from the monument, going for some 125 feet, there's a major crack in the soil that's appeared, and it's pulling away from the bank and also lowering. We immediately snapped into action, called disaster, I forget their acronym, but Vermont Disaster
FEMA?
Recovery. And we called FEMA, absolutely, but our local counterparts as well. The Rivers person from the environmental group here at the state all went up and evaluated it, and it's big. It hasn't fallen into the river yet, but it is a big area of slope, massive slope failure, about 125 feet long, up to about 15 feet back. And it is, while there's been no archaeological excavations formal ever in that particular portion, it's sandwiched between two known burial sites, so we have every reason to believe that there could be some amount of Native American remains in that area. We have pulled out all the stops, we're talking to FEMA, we're trying to get that event, which we think was precipitated on a May 4th to 5th flooding/wind event, which caused the trees to pull over, caused the roots to uproot, and then the whole land start to slide. But we've been going through various processes, and it's still ongoing right now. Even if we did get the FEMA funding, that's a reimbursement. So we, as the state, have to come up with a large chunk of money. We've had several consultants go out and try to give us, estimates. They're high. It's the only portion of the area that hasn't been rip-wrapped. And part of that is because we really only found out when we did a detailed deep dive. But after, if you've been out to, I think all of you have been out to the monument, there's some stone sort of, set off stones. After that, there's actually a 50-foot right-of-way that the Robinsons own. Then we own 50 feet. Then there's another person that owns 50 feet, and then it goes back to us for 2 lots. And so because it's this private state conglomeration that the crack cuts across, it's becoming very difficult to figure out what FEMA will, what FEMA won't cover, will they cover any of it, because this is the only event that's being listed in Franklin County. The storm event was originally only for Addison and Chittenden. We're also searching other avenues, but we had a meeting with our assistant secretary yesterday, so we're turning over every stone to try to get it done. But we're running headlong into various bureaucracies and everything. I don't think anyone's unwilling, but it's what to do. And at this point, because it's so profoundly disturbed, there's some people who think there's nothing we can do. Even if we rip-wrap it, it's gonna slide anyway.
What does that mean?
Rip-wrap, it's where you take big, like boulders, angular boulders, and put them along the bank. So if you've ever gone up, like, or armoring the bank, basically.
Okay.
And we've done that with most of the state-owned portion going from the monument out to Dead Creek. We did that, a portion in 91 and a portion in 94. But because we bought this interim parcel afterward as part of a larger, easement that the land trust bought then gave to us as, part of native site and potential burial protection, we just didn't rip-wrap that little 50 thing because we couldn't get the permission from the private landowners. Now they're all very much involved. They obviously don't want to lose this portion of their yards either, but it's tricky. If it was just private, they could leverage various grants. If it was just state, there's less, but it was possible. But anyway, I just wanted to assure everyone we are doing over and above everything. And I've got to give, a lot of credit to Scott Dillon, who spent a lot of nights and weekends and everything trying to draft letters, just do the rounds on phone calls, trying to do something. But, it's a bad time for this too because of the state budgets and everything's already locked down. There's no chance for someone to write in a last minute thing, and so that's where we're at. So
They've asked us to, last night they sent me an email and asked us to draft a letter from the commission talking about the importance of the site to FEMA so that they could get funding.
And Pete Thomas did that, right?
Yeah.
Pete Thomas is actually the FEMA archaeologist, and
Yeah.
so
He's epic, I love that guy.
Yeah.
So I started drafting it, so if anybody wants to help drafting it, or draft it, and it might behoove the Missisquoi people to draft their own letter and send it by tomorrow morning.
By tomorrow morning.
Yes. And we have to do this tonight. He wants me to draft it now with you and then bring it over there, and I don't even know where over there is. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna draft it, and then I'm gonna scan it and send it to them in an email. But we just have to draft some language about why it's important and yeah, from the indigenous perspective, but from the commission, yeah.
A while ago, there was a big email thread that was going throughout all kinds of, all the different Abenaki bands, and discussing the potential of getting a cultural center going. And so what I did is I took a document that years ago Melody, me, and a student of mine who is in historic preservation, Julie Singh, did with a support, as you can see, of the 2010 quadricentennial. The idea was that one of the outcomes of the quadricentennial was to be a Franco-Vermont or French-Canadian heritage center and a indigenous Vermont heritage center. And there was a group of us in the the Native American Quad group that were tasked with trying to develop a vision for what that looked like. Part of that was going around and talking to, I think scores anyway, if not hundreds, but certainly scores of indigenous people, asking them what their thoughts, ideas, and beliefs were. And that generated a document which I reported on in 2011 to you guys, so it should be in your archives someplace. But after this new flurry of activity, I got back and, well, a bunch of us in this email thread started trading ideas back and forth and back and forth. And it emerged very quickly that the idea that we had early of a brick and mortar Euro-American style museum was probably not going to fly for a whole series of reasons, one of which was upfront cost, and the second was maintenance. Who would be able to keep the lights on, pay the taxes. The idea was, would we be able to afford to have a full-time person there, even at a pittance pay? And the consensus of most people was that unless we got a big grant, we wouldn't be able to get this thing, and B, if we had to come up with some kind of an endowment, we wouldn't be able to staff it and pay for it in the future. So with that, I wrote this as a rewriting of the original document with the input from all of the other contributors to that, the big email discussion chain. So the idea of it is there's some needs assessment here. The basic need that we had back in those days was political. In other words, it's got to be in a neutral place. No particular tribe can own it. It's got to have a ceremonial component. In other words, a place for all tribes to come together to do intertribal activities. It has to have community memory. This was important. Melody, I think this was one of your ideas, wasn't it, too? Because the Passamaquoddies and other tribes and all their centers, they have a community memory, kind of a module where they have pictures and other commemorations of important elders and others who have passed.
Like at the Smithsonian with the Elders Wall.
Yeah, and like what we saw up in Passamaquoddy
Yeah.
a long time ago, with all the baskets and everything set up as families. Lots of interesting prototypes there. Number 4 was one that the chiefs seemed to have an interest in, and actually that same concern led to the thing I reported to you on in January. Cultural education, the idea that Rich, really interestingly, it's called essentialist Wabanaki or Abenaki training. In other words, what do we know historically, culturally, that is local to our region, as opposed to all of the external memories that are coming in from the Great Lakes, powwow, spirituality, and things of that sort. And so one of the ideas of a cultural center would be, in Rich's words, essentialist. In other words, it would give a potential for all the different bands to contribute their historical and cultural knowledge that is place-based here, that can then be made available to everybody. Now then there's economic development, stuff like that. So these were the needs that were expressed years ago and kind of reaffirmed, at least some of them, in the early 2018 email flurries. So what we had began discussing was kind of decolonizing this idea of a cultural center. In other words, getting away from a brick and mortar kind of a thing. And so what some of us came up, and Rich was very important in that, and Melody, and others contributing to this, the idea of a place rather than a space. Start building from an environment, a place that could first be just an area to have ceremony. You don't need buildings, you don't need anything. Then think about expanding into, if we've got a forest, to alter the forest, build an agroforest that could be used as a potential medicine woods, to have areas where you could raise crops. All of this is minimalist infrastructure, inexpensive, and in a sense, when you actually look at the essentialist Vermont data, we have little on ceremony, but in terms of land use, land tenure, and things like that, we have a huge amount. That's, if you remember, our petitions were mostly based on land tenure, land use, place-based cultural things. And so this will kind of, not mimic it, but track that essential idea. And then, so I deal with landscapes and all these other components. So Melody said that last month you brought up the idea here of that. So I typed this up and forwarded it to you. This is a result of, many years. It's been, I don't think that building a heritage center is as difficult as people say. For example, back in 1997, just me and my wife, and $1,800, we built the Abenaki Cultural Center at Missisquoi that was up and running and functioning for over 12 years until internal stuff blew that and a bunch of other things out of the water. And so, it was 3.5 months, a lot of new paint and stuff like that. So it can be done. If this thing we actually do get a space that is decent enough to house ancestral, essentialist Abenaki things, that I still haven't donated all of my stuff yet. I still have probably about 3,000 objects and certainly another 12,000 images that could go into an archive here. So, but I've donated quite a few things to the Historical Society, ECHO, and the Maritime Museum. A bunch of other things have gone to the Passamaquoddies. A lot of my Wabanaki things I'm sending back to the tribes that they originally were produced by. But we could outfit a nice place. So that's what I wanted to bring, is just share this history with you to see where you'd like to go with it.
And our last point is blessing of the fields.
That was great.
That would be you.
That was great. It actually brought some folks together that,
Does everybody know what they did for blessing of the fields?
huh?
Only
Can
from
you-
Facebook or Reger.
Thank
Can
goodness
you
for
go 10 steps
Facebook.
back?
10 steps back would be,
What was it? What'd you do?
well,
What'd you learn?
I'm gonna have to go like
Who was
11,
there?
I'm gonna go 11 steps back.
Okay.
I wasn't able to get.
In trying to work with Fred Wiseman in reference to things that we wanted to do or bring back, it's a process because we had, for a while, had leadership that was not interested, quite frankly, and that's putting it gently. People would just exclude the Missisquoi tribe from a great many things because there was no participation or no willingness to participate. First thing that I wanted to do was change that. So, in speaking with Fred, it's like, what can we do? And he is a great, incredible repository of knowledge and things that we've done. And we sat down and we said, all right, let's, Crystal kind of coined the phrase, bring your native back. And that's what we decided to make our campaign slogan. So it was a trend of what can we do? And then we kind of looked at the calendar and said, okay, in the Abenaki calendar, what can we do that would be, in correlation with that? Long story short, incredibly generous, he decided to give up his time every month to do an event, whether it was talking at the tribal office or giving an event like a class or something. Well, anyway, he brought up the blessing of the seeds or blessing of the field. And he told us up front, this is going to take some dedication. Do you think we can do it? And, the hope spring is eternal. So we're like, yeah. So we started off with a meeting and we had like 24, 25 people. And we said, here's what's happening. If we want to do this, it's going to be here, it'll be at this time. You're going to have to learn this, we have to make this. And the training was event driven. It wasn't a come on by and learn a song or make regalia just, for the sheer cause of doing it. It was, we have this event, I will teach you what you need to know for that event, which was great because you knew what you were doing was going to be used. So he came in and Don Stevens attended one of them, and we started with some singing, and we did, maybe a month later we did a little dancing, but it was getting people together. So the 24 eventually dwindled down to 11, but it was what we needed for that event. And we went to the Intervale, which I had never been to before. I had heard of it, but never had been there. And we practiced our skills. We made some needed items. Some regalia was made. It was amazing to see. We had somebody drop off a couple of bulk materials, like the tea dresses were made out of this.
Like curtain material or something.
It was like, but it was a full skein of it or something. It was huge. I'm like, why would somebody drop this at our office? We managed, when I say we, Allie was like amazing. She's this little wind-up robot, like the Energizer Bunny, that I swear she's OCD, because if you put her on task, she will just laser focus on this, and she must be hell to live with, because she will just turn herself into that.
She's getting married this fall, too.
Yeah, I have to talk to him. But, so, anyhow, we took the stuff, she made some wonderful dresses, and then Fred's wife helped, and we showed up and we made sun discs and stuff out of feathers, and it was a great time. It got people together, and all the while you were still learning a skill. So we attended the interview, which, like I said, was my first time going. We met a bunch of people there. It was we conducted some interviews, and it was fun. And you're still conducting a ritual that was very old, and it was powerful. And the most amazing thing was at the end of it, we're standing around and somebody's looking up, and I don't remember who, but they're like, what kind of bird is that? And it was like a huge osprey. And it didn't just make a fly by and go, it kind of hung out for a while. And so
circuits.
Yeah, it was impressive to see this, at the end of your ceremony, you look up and there's this huge bird of prey just circling around. It was a beautiful bird. On a gorgeous day, we got lucky. Hey, knock on fake wood or not. We had just the greatest weather and stuff for this event. But it was powerful enough to me as an individual that when we discussed would we do another event, it's like, yeah, absolutely. Because maybe it'll bring in 25 more people. We might only end up with 11, but guess what? That's 11 people we didn't have with these skills before. So, and the public was very receptive. They were jumping up there, bringing their seeds over to be blessed. And at the end, people were talking and asking questions. It was, I feel it was a great event that was worthwhile, and I would wholeheartedly support doing as many different events and reoccurring events as possible.
I put some people of the school systems that are doing the secret renewal stuff. I told them to contact you for Blessing of the Fields. And some of the kids I know that go to the schoolhouse are, there's a Passamaquoddy student, and there is a few Abenaki students. So I think it would be nice because there's a couple kids there who would really love it. So
yeah, and anything that we can do to attract these kids is, personally, that's one of my goals is kind of mending fences, as well as bringing these younger folks in, because that is the future. And we can sit there and say, oh, that's great, but until you actually do something about it, it doesn't mean, you can put stuff on paper, you can talk about it all day, but until you put it into practice, it's just talk.
yeah.
So, yeah, anything people can direct our way, if there's any way I can get young folks involved.
Cool. Awesome. Well done.
No, I thank Fred for his teachings and participation, and Morgan Lamphere is one of our tribal council members that he is a music teacher by trade. He appears to be busier than a one-armed paper hanger, and he would make time to come up for a while. It was each week, and then it became like every other week or something to work on these songs. And so being a teacher, you kind of knew how to sit down and take people that knew nothing about how to do something like this and say, well, here, this is what we're going to do. We're going to break it into this. But yeah, he deserves recognition for his part. So he did very well.
It was great.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to add to this is in terms of the epistemological or the knowledge base that's behind it. I shifted what I do a little bit after my January talk that I gave here, because I got some very negative feedback from several people about the thing that I was going to do, the harvest ceremony. In other words, where do you get this? Where do how does he know this? Where does it come from? Is it Abenaki? Is it just made up? So what I'm going to do from now on is each one of the things that I do is going to have a complete document associated with complete citations to each part of it and where they come, documenting, and that's on the documentary and bibliographic notes, so that there will never be any question about is this ethnogenesis or is this essentialist, okay? So every dance, every song, every part of the organization is based on unknown Wabanaki, and in some cases Abenaki antecedents, some from Odanak, A little bit, about 6% to maybe 10%, is Eastern Abenaki and Passamaquoddy. The organization is based on the protocols of the wampum laws of the Wabanaki Confederacy, to which the Abenakis belonged. And I don't think anybody will argue with the law. That's our way of doing it. So that was the organization, and each individual component is documented, and all of the material, all the music and everything is on file and available. And so I just want to be absolutely clear that from now on, everything that we're going to go moving forward is going to be essentialist. In other words, there's not going to be any thing from outside of the realm of the Wabanaki area in any of the projects that I'm doing with Missisquoi. And there can't be, I mean, everybody for political reasons is going to grouse about it, but in terms of the documentary and spiritual, or whatever you want to call it, origins and provenance of everything is documented.